I could say a lot of things. In fact, most of the stuff about Rabbi Melchior is in your packet, so I'm not going to read anything that I prepared. Because I'd just like you to hear him and not me. I am so profoundly fond of this man for a couple of reasons. I believe that I have met very few human beings who have the value system of Rabbi Melchior. He truly is a man of peace. And I'm not talking about peace, let's sit down, folks, and talk and make peace. To him, peace and godliness are the same thing. And I am not a practicing religious person, but the moral fiber within Michael Melchior touches, I think, everybody whom he meets. It certainly has touched me. And any time I can hear him at a lecture, or even privately in a discussion, there's a wealth of information, knowledge, and wisdom that I can gain from him. One of my favorite sayings is, I know many people who are very, very smart. I know very few who are wise. I would like you to please meet my very wise friend, Rabbi Michael Melchior.
Well, that was a very moving beginning to this session. And I want to say already from the beginning and the outset that I'm very grateful to the university, to the college, to the St. Paul's College, to the Arthur Mauro Center, to those who have decided and made this decision to invite me to come and give the third annual Sol Kanee lecture on peace and justice. I'm also very grateful to Charles Bronfman. It's difficult maybe to find two people who come from so different backgrounds as we come from, and the sincere friendship and devotion and helping also in difficult times, which you have bestowed upon me, and those purposes and goals which we are living for is something very, very extraordinary. In our father's sayings, we say, "Aseh lecha rav ukneh lecha chaver," that you have to get a rabbi for yourself, but you have to buy a friend. I always thought about this, and while you were speaking now, I understood. To get a rabbi, that's an easy thing. You just have to get a rabbi. Give him a salary, you get a rabbi, a teacher. But to get a friend is something you have to invest much more in, and your friendship is really very, very moving and appreciated. I also would like to thank those of you who have come today to listen. I think that the university should have a special prize for you to have come in spite of everything. I saw what it was like during the day. There's one thing in the bio which is missing, I must tell you, a very important thing in my past, which I think that maybe somebody would have noticed, and that is that I was the official rabbi for the Winter Olympic Games in Lillehammer in 1994. And I think that there were people who wanted me to feel at home and therefore took specially care that nobody could leave their driveways with their cars this morning, the buses couldn't come and so on. But we came, and with the help of Charles. And we're here, and I'm delighted for everyone who really did this courageous step, and in spite of everything, all the good excuses you could have had to stay home cozily with a fireplace and some good book or whatever you like to do at home, and you decided to come here, and I'm in deep appreciation also for that. Because of that, I will, I think, put aside what I thought to talk about. and try to speak more from the heart. We have a Jewish expression, which actually the Islam has exactly the same expression, that what is spoken from the heart also will go into the hearts. And I would like to try to do that. I come from Jerusalem, from a troublesome spot in this world, a place which should and will be a gate to heaven, the place which people of all the Abrahamite religions look towards. And from this place, I talk to you about a Jerusalem, which actually, according to the portion of this week, I just thought about this is a combination, it's a dualism. It's Salem, which means peace, of course, but which is called up from the universal king of Salem, Melchizedek, the king of Salem. And it's Abraham, who was the first person who had Yiru, which means God-fearing, the first person who found the belief in the one God, who is the God and creator of every human being. So it's a combination of the Jewish and the universal, which already exists in the name. And God did not want to take one out for the other. From this city of Jerusalem, a city of hope, a city of dreams, I want to speak to you of something which I think is necessary for the world we're living in today, not just for the peace of Jerusalem, not just for the peace of the Middle East, but which is important in Nigeria, and it's important in Sri Lanka, and it's important in Central America, it's important in Paris, and all over the world in these days. We are in many ways at a crossroads in human history. There was a period where the dangerous wars of the 20th centuries, the wars that you and I grew up with, were wars of conflicting territorial, economic, nationalist interests. Today's conflicts are also as such, but have in them also an element which we know from before the world wars, an element which has to do with ethnicity, with culture, with religion. And what we very often do is that we put these issues aside because they're so difficult to deal with. And when we put them aside, others will take them and they will use them, but they will use them in a way where they become a danger to the future of humankind. We're at a crossroad, my friends, where there are people who want a clash of civilizations, who develop it, who cultivate it, who encourage it, who will give the theology behind it. That we are in an overall clash between maybe a Judeo-Christian world and an Islamic world. Now, I know people all over the world, Jews and Christians and Muslims, who believe strongly in that paradigm of the world. But that paradigm brings no hope for a future. That paradigm makes us, all of us, hostages for somewhere in a deep, dark past, with no possibility of looking beyond and building together a future. And therefore I think, and I will suggest for you, and this is why I've come to Winnipeg today, I will suggest to you another paradigm. A paradigm where we create coalitions across the board, Christians with Jews, with Muslims, even with good atheists. Now, create coalitions together, coalitions of values, where we all take the battles which we have to take, because there is a clash. But the clash is inside every civilization, inside every community, inside every country. Maybe even from a theological, philosophical perspective, maybe inside every one of us. Because we all have something totalitarian in us. We all have in us the wish and the desire, first of all, to take care of what is us, as if we possess not only the truth, but the whole truth. And therefore this is a battle which we have to fight. And today it's not a battle like before the First World War, but it's a battle where we have weapons of mass destruction, where we have rogue states, where we have states who are willing to talk about other states in measures of wiping them out of the map. So the possibility of mass communication today is so much different than it was 100 years ago. Today, if you want to poison people with hatred and xenophobia, you just need to spend a couple of bucks and open an internet site, and you can already spread your message of hatred and poison to millions of people. So therefore, the real challenge is, I think, not to say that religion and culture and ethnicity is not an issue. It is an issue. But not to turn it into the main issue which the haters want. If we come to the point where the conflicts of this world becomes my God against your God, we will never be able to find a solution. Who wants to compromise on our God? And therefore, our purpose must be to say our God and your God is the same God. It's the God who has created all of us in his image. It's the basis for all of humanity. First of all, we are human beings. Then afterwards, we are Christians and Jews and Muslims. That is why when the first human beings were created, the very first human being was not a Jew, was not a Muslim, was not a Christian. He was an Adam, just a human being. He wasn't even just a man. The Bible describes it, it's not always correctly translated. The Hebrew text says that the first human being was both a man and a woman. Afterwards they were split in two. So that never we should be able to say to any other person, my forefathers were more important than your forefathers. Because my forefathers and your forefathers, no matter which race or which religion they were all the same. Now, this is all fine. But how come then, with such an obvious thing, how come we don't get there? What is happening in the world which has resulted in this? I want to tell you, I think we have some very deep problems in the interpretation of religion and of all religion. I want to start with my own religion, because it's always easy to talk about the others. I'll tell you an episode I had this week. On Thursday, I was called up by a radical, quite radical Jewish religious radio station, which also has an internet site, and you can read it, all over the internet. And they were interviewing me on a specific issue, but they don't like very much my politics. So they said to me, when we were at the end of the interview, and this was agreed upon that we wouldn't be talking about these things, but okay. They said, how can you go to synagogue this coming Sabbath? I said, what's the problem? I said, but we will be reading in the synagogue this Sabbath that the Almighty promised to Abraham the whole of the land, the north and the south and the east and the west. And God said to Abraham, this shall be for you and your descendants for all future. Now, how come that you can go to synagogue and sit and listen to this divine promise And you can say that you have to compromise land, that we have to give to the Palestinians land which is ours? Are you not ashamed of coming to the synagogue this Sabbath? So I said to them the following: no, I'm not ashamed. Because I don't only read the beginning of the story, but I read the continuation also. Now, I agree with the beginning. God has promised us the land. But you know what actually happened if you read the story in Genesis? What actually happened was that Abraham came to the land, and he brought with him all his people. He has his nephew Lot, if you remember the story, and he has all the shepherds and all the people who are working for them. And then it said that the text says that there was a terrible disagreement between the shepherds of Abraham and the shepherds of Lot. And what were they disagreeing about? They were disagreeing according to the interpretations, and interpretations has a good basis in the text, which I won't go into now. They were disagreeing about the following. Lot's shepherds said that in the land there was a lot of grass and a lot of fruit, and that they should be able to go and take freely from all the grass and all the fruit and all the crop which were in the land. And Abraham's shepherd said, no, we can't do that. And Lot's shepherd said, yes, but you know, God promised that it will all be ours. So it's really all ours. And Lot even had a dream that he would inherit Abraham, because Abraham had no children at the time. So he would inherit Abraham. So he said, it's going to be ours in any case, so we might as well take all of it now. And Abraham's shepherd said, no, we can't do that. There are other people living here. It's theirs. Although we have a divine promise, we have to look around. Who is living here? And this conflict came to Abraham and Lot, and when they couldn't resolve the conflict, Abraham said, I can't live with you anymore. Although you're my only family, we can't live together. If this is your philosophy, you can decide where you want to go. If you want to go to the right, I'll go to the left. You want to go to the left, I'll go to the right. You can pick. But we cannot be together if this is your philosophy. So I said to these kind people from the radio station, I said, this is the philosophy of Judaism. It's true, we have a divine promise. By the way, the Muslims also believe that they have a divine promise, that this is all Muslim land. But we are here, and we will not move from here, because it is our land. And they are here, and they will not move from here, because it is their land. And therefore, if we want to find out together, then we will have to divide the land so that they can find security and peace, and we can find security and peace. Now, I said to them, if you don't want to read this week's portion, then you can read next week's portion. And they said, oh yes, next week's portion, what do we read? We read that the people in the land, they took all the wells which Abraham had dug in order to bring prosperity and water and so on to the peoples of the land, and they filled them up with filth. The wells. So you see, it doesn't help your philosophy of trying to make prosperity for all the people who are living in the land. It just won't work, because they're going to come and they're going to fill it up, and then Abraham will dig another well and they'll fill that up and go on and on and on. So you see, Abraham's philosophy didn't work. So I said to them, you know what? You're right. But then read what it says a little later in the portion. And you will read that Isaac, Abraham's son, continued. And he also dug wells where his father had dug wells. And also people came and did the same. And eventually his assistants became sick and tired of making all these wells. They gave up on peace. Said there's no partner. But he continued Until one day, says the text, next week's portion, you can all read it. One day he dug the wells, and they didn't fill them up because they understood that these wells were for the prosperity of all. And then they made peace, and they created a city which we call Rehovot, which some of you might know. In Israel today, we have a big scientific institute there called the Weizmann Institute, one of the important contributions from the states of Israel to all the peoples of the area and to all the peoples of the world. So it worked. But then they went on. And they said to me, yes, but Isaac had a brother called Ishmael. And Ishmael, he's the father of the Muslims. Isaac is the father of the Jews. And you know who was the real son? I said, yes. But you know what happened? After Abraham became alone, he lost his wife. He sent his people to a place called Be'er L'Chai Ro'i. You know what was there in this place? If you read in the Bible text, there was Ishmael. He called back Ishmael. And Ishmael and Isaac came together. And if you read about the funeral of Abraham, you will read that Ishmael and Isaac, hand in hand, did this together. So why am I telling you this? I'm saying it because you can find, of course, in all texts, if you want to, you can find a basis for hatred of the other. You can find a basis for bigotry. You can even find maybe a basis for racism if you look hard enough. But that's if you don't look at the totality of the text. If you look at the totality of the text says again and again and again, you should love the other, you should love the stranger because you were a stranger in the land of Egypt. That's the only way you can build up. This text is 36 times in the Torah. No other text is so many times. So if you build your philosophy on bigotry, on hatred of the other, you will never be able to build a society. Now, I want to tell you that already 20 years ago, I started with talks with Muslim Palestinian friends. It was very difficult in the beginning. It had to be all secret meetings. People were afraid of getting killed, of getting hurt, that it should come out. Every time we had agreed on meeting somewhere, the day before it was cancelled or moved to another place. And we started getting together again and again and again and again. And eventually I saw that on the other side, there are people just like we're people. They're totalitarians, just as we have totalitarians. And we know them very well because they're on the front page of our newspapers every day. We also strengthen them in many ways. We empower them in many ways. But they also have human beings like us. They have religious leaders. It's important for them to stress and find that Islam, that the Quran, is not a book, a recipe book of how to blow up the future of humankind. My good friend, Sheikh Tal al-Sidr, I have heard him speak in front of 3,000 believing Muslims on a Friday in Ramadan and say to these Muslims that to blow up a child, no matter if it's a Palestinian child or a Jewish child, including a child of the settlers, is the worst crime you can do against the Quran, against Islam. But do we want to hear Sheikh Tal al-Sidr? Will that be on the front page of any newspaper? Will that be breaking news in the CNN? Somebody sends an email to Al Jazeera that they'll blow up some airplane somewhere, and for sure it will be breaking news. But these people are there. And we have a vested interest in creating a coalition with them. Because that is the only way we can build together a future. The Tal al-Siders, he was one of the creators of the Hamas. Really bad guy. Whose philosophy it is to blow up all the Jews. No Jews, living or dead, have any right to be in the land of Israel, according to the Hamas program. But do we then give up? Or do we continue digging wells? I want to tell you, last year, I was invited to address an Islamic summit conference. As you know, that's not such a normal thing. That an Orthodox rabbi, a staunch Zionist, member of Israeli parliament. That time I was in opposition, not in the government, but still. Invited to speak to a summit of Islamists. And some of them really, really, believe me, really bad guys. I was invited to speak for 40 minutes. And the talk went on for more than 5 hours. Don't worry, it's not going to happen today. But the result was that they described it as an earthquake. And what did I speak of? The same things I'm speaking to you today. Of who we are. And if we know who we are, and where our borders are, where our home is, then we should also respect who you are and where your homes are and where your borders are. And I think it works. It's not an easy path. We all know the rhetoric. You should know also many people are afraid. They don't understand the language. The language of Oslo was not their language. When Shimon Peres talked about the new Middle East, they were hearing something else. They were hearing some kind of cheap Western secularization process which would crush their traditional societies. That's what they were afraid of. They said if peace means to give up who we are, what our identity is, where our legitimization lies, then we don't want that peace. But you should know that the moment you speak to them and you come from a perspective, no, we do not want to change your society. We want together to build a society where there are values which we have in common. You also as Muslims, as we as Jews, have to deal with issues of tradition, religion, and modernity. You know, Europe thought that it was finished with that debate a couple of 100 years ago with the French Revolution. And suddenly they wake up one morning in November 2005, and they found out that they're not finished with it at all. That debate is very much on the table and Europe hasn't started to find out how it will grope with it. And we're not talking about just tolerance, acceptance that there other exists. But we're talking about how do you create a society together of values with respecting but also including and becoming richer because of a multiculturalism which can enrich the whole society instead of doing the opposite. I think that this is really the challenge today of all civilizations. 3 years ago in Alexandria, we got together all the religious leaders of the Middle East under the auspices of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. George Carey, now Lord George Carey, and the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Sheikh Tamimi, and we decided to go together on a path which is very difficult. We've now built 3 centers over this past year. One in Jerusalem, one in Kfar Qasem, which is led by Israeli Muslims, Israeli-Palestinian Muslims, it's complicated, and one in Gaza, in the center of Hamas and jihad, dialogue of civilizations in the heart of Gaza. And we're bringing in teachers, educators, principals, young imams, young rabbis, young priests, cultural personalities, bringing them together to start to move in this dialogue of civilizations. The good news is it's possible. You can really get people together. And one day came to my office 2 people from Nigeria, from Kaduna, from the northern Nigeria. One, a Christian priest, a young Christian priest, who came without his arm. He has a rubber arm. He had been assaulted by Muslim terrorists who had killed his bodyguards and cut off his arm. The other, the head of what he defined as the Muslim terrorists, a young Muslim imam who was sure that he was going to spend the rest of his life in killing Christians. Now these people, these 2 young people, young leaders, they decided to make peace. They read about Alexandria, they asked to get the text, and they worked out exactly the same text as Alexandria because the conflict is exactly the same. And they implemented it in Kaduna, and they stopped the civil war, which had killed more than 100,000 people there. And they took the text of Alexandria and carved it in stone in the main square in Kaduna. They carved it in stone. They invited me to come as the guest of Nigeria to be celebrated for my contribution to stopping the bloodshed. Now these people, these courageous young theologians, found out that we have to stop using religion in order to kill each other. We can use religion for the opposite. Religion can be the source of hope, the source of future, not the source of burying us in some deep, dark past. I said, with all due respect to the honor you're giving me, we need you more than you because you've already implemented Alexandria. We've just written it. We haven't yet come to the implementation. We have to learn from you how they are going from mosque to mosque, from church to church. Every time there is a language of incitement and hatred, they stop the people there talking this language. They take it out of the school books. How can you make peace with each other if you're teaching each other that the other is the Satan, the devil, the representative of all evil on earth? You can't do it together. Oslo couldn't succeed because Oslo was a process which only dealt with the peace between the politicians. If you don't have peace between the religions, if you don't have peace between the peoples, and the peoples look towards religion for their major source of inspiration and legitimacy, if you don't have it, you won't succeed with all the goodwill of the politicians. It's not always they have goodwill, but when they have goodwill, it won't succeed. I remember I was sitting with Ehud Barak on the plane on the way to the Camp David meetings in the summer of year 2000. And Ehud Barak was 100% sure that Arafat would not leave Camp David without a signed agreement. Now he says different, but I was there. We were sitting. It's a long plane. It's a very old airplane. It takes 16 hours to get from Jerusalem. You have to land in England first and then to get to Washington and go to Camp David. For 16 hours we were discussing. He was sure. I had the American ambassador, Martin Indig, next to me. He can be a witness. I said to him, but Arafat is not ready. Look at what they're teaching. The people are not ready. We are still the enemy in their eyes. We're still the devil in their eyes. How is he going to make a deal with that kind of enemy without preparation? We didn't deal with those issues. I asked Ehud Barak, I said to him, I'm willing to give you a Jewish-Muslim joint agreement on the issue of Jerusalem and holy places. I was a daring man in my young days. Give you such an agreement. I'll give you on a silver platter before you go to Camp David. He said, no, religion only messes up things. Maybe he's right. There is a lot of messing up in religion. But religion is there as a factor, and ignoring it doesn't make it go away. I remember the 10th of December, 1994, Shimon Peres and Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat got the Nobel Peace Prize. And we were sitting at the dinner after the Nobel Prize in Oslo, and I was sitting with one of Arafat's closest associates, and I said to him the same as what I'm saying to you today, more or less. And he said to me, you know what? Rabbis should go into their synagogues. Imams should go into their mosques. Priests should go into their churches. And we politicians should lock the doors and throw the keys in the sea. And it sounded very Israeli, It could just as well be one of the leading Israelis who said the same. By the way, also one of the leading Americans or others who have led the peace negotiations. I was together a couple of weeks ago with Madeleine Albright. She said for 8 years, as Secretary of State, she believed the same. Now she knows that she's wrong. And she confessed in front of a whole audience. It's very unusual for a politician to do something like that. But then she's preparing a book called The Mighty and the Almighty, where she will explain why she was wrong. She said Alexandria is the most important thing which has happened in the Middle East over the last 10 years. And what I hope that we can get, to a situation where we can create this coalition of civilizations, where we can battle the totalitarianism. Religious totalitarianism is a danger for the future of the world, no doubt. Right? There were two big totalitarian movements in the last century which threatened the world. Nazism and communism, no comparison beyond that. The threat today to the world lies especially in the Muslim totalitarianism. And let there be no doubt about that. But the only way we can beat Muslim totalitarianism, Christian totalitarianism, and Jewish totalitarianism is by making these cross coalitions. We all have to take care of our totalitarians. We can hold down terror, yes, maybe. But we cannot beat the terror. We cannot beat the motivation for terror if we not deal with the source of it, which whether we like it or not, according to all experts in terror, the source of it lies in religion. Look at what the people who did September 11th, what they were doing the hours before they committed suicide and did their atrocities and their crimes in America. Look what they did. Which text did they read? Now, if they knew that there were leading Muslim forces, great religious leaders, who were saying that they would not go to the coming world and be promised all the good promises of paradise, but they would burn up in hell for crushing the image of God, the image of Allah. If they just at one moment would think that that is what, and the majority of Muslim leaders say that, but they don't hear them. We need to enforce them, to strengthen them, to encourage them, to create coalitions with them, to invest in them. In the radicals, always there will be investments. There's so many interests in the radicals. We need to treat people a different way. We in Israel need to treat people in a different way. I was just now in a Bedouin city where the kids leave school when they're 15, 16 years old because they don't have good enough teachers. What are these kids going to do? They're not going to get a job. Most of their parents don't have a job. What are they going to do? They can go into petty theft and criminality, or they can join the Islamic movements who give them a home, give them a legitimacy. Which alternative do we create for these young people? We there and we in Paris and we in the Arab world than we in Canada. What do we do about this? I think the sooner we understand this and we build this together with all the good forces which are in all the traditions and in all the cultures, the sooner we start dealing again with the issues of how we combine tradition and modernity. It's not easy, but it's relevant in a world where religion becomes a stronger and a stronger force. The sooner we do that, the sooner we can again open the gates to heaven and not be on a slippery slope, which we might be on during this period. Well, this, my friend, is the reason why I came to Winnipeg. I want to salute you that you have here a center. What can be more beautiful? A center for peace and justice. A center which deals with exactly these issues. I want to salute you for developing and educating experts, PhD students, who will be helping us. You know, we don't really know. We're just, we're using our gut feelings and starting to talk to each other. We know nothing about each other. We know nothing about how to deal with these questions. But we know it's necessary. And we need the academic uppacking. We need the research. We need the assistance of a university which wants to be relevant in this world, which is therefore concerned with the social issues and issues of peace and justice, which is decisive for the future of this world, and not a university which closes itself in the academic world and says, well, the rest can go to hell. This is what we need. And this is why it is a great honor for me to have stood in front of you today. Thank you very much.